Imagine a portfolio that doesn't just tell you a story, but shows it in 3D. Today I'm breaking down how I built this jaw-dropping 3D portfolio that's anything but ordinary. From an astronaut falling from the sky to interactive project previews. This is the future of showcasing your work. And here's the best part. We are building it using just the essential 20% of React knowledge that you will use in 80% of your projects. Before we dive into the detail, let me show you what we are building today. This isn't your average portfolio. It is a fully immersive experience designed to grab attention and leave a lasting impression. Here's what you will see. The first thing that catches your eye is the hero section. Picture this. An astronaut is falling from the sky, and as they descend, your name and role appears in bold. Clean text, it is dramatic, eye-catching, and it sets the tone for what's to come. As you scroll down, a smooth parallax effect kicks in, making the entire page feel alive. Next up is the About Me section. Now, how do you introduce yourself without sounding boring? Simple, you make it visual and interactive. We're gonna use a bento grid layout to showcase your skills, location, and personality in a way that's fun to explore. It is not just text on a page, it is a story told through design. And trust me, it is way more engaging than your typical, "Hi, I'm John and I'm a developer." Now let's talk about the My Project section. This is where the magic happens. Each project is displayed with a clean title and tags that highlight the tool and framework you use. But here's the cool part. When you hover over a project, a preview image pops up, following your mouse cursor. Want more details? Just click Read More and dive deeper. It is intuitive, interactive, and it keeps the user engaged without overwhelming them. In the Work Experience section, I've kept it simple but impactful. This is where you share your journey, what you have done, where you have worked, and the skills you have honed along the way. It is not just a list of jobs, it is a timeline of growth and expertise. Of course, what's a portfolio without some social proof? In the Hear From Clients section, you are going to include testimonials from people you have worked with. This isn't just about bragging, it is about building trust. When potential clients see that others have had great experience working with you, they are more likely to reach out. Finally, we have the Contact section. This is where the conversation starts. Whether someone wants to collaborate, hire you, or just say hello, they can easily send you a message. It's simple, it's clean, and it is designed to encourage action. So what do you think? This isn't just a portfolio. It is an interactive story about you. If you're ready to create something next level, hit like, subscribe, and let's build this together step by step. Okay, first we're gonna create a folder called Portfolio, and let's open this up in our VS Code. Okay, before framework installation process begins, first I'm gonna go ahead and create a new file which is called .npmrc. npmrc file is a configuration file used by the npm, and let's say audit is equals to false. This will allow us to ignore packages warning. Okay, for setting up our project pretty fast, I'm gonna use Vite. Click on the Get Started button and copy the npm create Vite at latest. And make sure you installed Node.js version 18 plus or 20 plus. And let's head back to VS Code, open up the terminal, and paste it right here. For project name, add // which is going to initialize it in our current repository. Choose ignore files and continue. Let's say React JavaScript. Now we gotta do npm install. Run npm run dev so that we can see the result. Let's click on the localhost. Yeah, as you can see, it is working properly. Next, we need styling. For that, we're going to use TailwindCSS version 4, which is a brand new version. Let's head to the docs and using With tab, and there we're going to follow the instruction. Copy the npm and back to VS Code. Create a terminal and paste it right here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and split my browser and VS Code so that we can see what's going on better. After the installation, we need to configure our Vite plugin by copy and pasting the highlighted sections into vite.config.js, which is basically saying importing Tailwind in Vite configuration file. Okay, let's open this up and do exactly what we need to do. In this file, we're gonna say import Tailwind CSS from @tailwindcss/Vite and add the Tailwind method within the bracket. Now we gotta import Tailwind CSS into the index.css. Let's copy it. You know what? Before I'm going to do that, first let's clean up some file and folders that we don't need them. Later on, we're going to add them. We don't need app.css because we already have index.css and as well as the assets folder. In app.jsx, I'm going to remove everything. And in the index.css, I'm going to replace everything with @import TailwindCSS. We are good with the main.jsx, and finally, let's remove public folder. In app component, I'm going to run refce. If you guys wondering what is refce, refce is a React snippet that allows us to spin up React component pretty fast. Okay, now down below, I'm going to say exactly this one. So let's give it a class name of text-3xl font -bold and underline. Now, as you can see, it is working properly. If you're not sure, you can give it a color as well. So let's say text-red-500. Now we are sure that it is working. So the main problem is that if I hover my mouse over an attribute, you can see that my IntelliSense is not working since I have installed Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. As you can see it right here. If I scroll down in here, it is saying I need to have Tailwind configuration file in our workspace to activate IntelliSense. Let's go ahead and do this. Create a new file and call tailwind.config.js. And let's go back to the Tailwind website and convert the version to version 3. Go to the documentation and inside the framework tab, we are going to choose Vite. Simply copy this and paste it right over here. Let's turn this to version 4. Okay, now it is working. Okay, before we continue to create the project, first we got to import some files and folders into our project. I'm going to start with index.css file. I'm just going to copy and paste everything right here. These are just themes and colors and utility classes that we are going to use throughout our project. So you can get these files and folders in my GitHub repository down in the description below. Let's add the public folder as well. The public folder contains some logos, some project images, and some social icons and so on. Right now we have defined files and folder structure, and now we are ready to craft our project by modifying our app component. What I'm going to do is remove this class name and let's give it a container and mx auto and max-7xl, which is we are defining the maximum width of 1280 pixel. Now this div is responsible to hold our sections. So what I mean by that, for example, the navbar, heroes, about, and so on. Okay, first let's start with the navbar. So in src folder, I'm going to create a folder called sections. And within it, I'm going to create a navbar.jsx. Now let's run refce. Let's remove the import and let's change the N to uppercase. Okay, let's add that navbar into app component so that we can see the result. Let's give it a class name of fixed because it is always on top, and let's define inset-x-0 in order to take the full width, z-20 in order to make it always over the other elements, w-full, and backdrop blur-lg to make it blur. And let's define a background primary, which is a custom color that I have defined in the index.css, and with the opacity of 40. Okay, now within this div, let's create a class name of max-auto c-space max-7xl. Now within this div, I'm going to create a class name with flex item center to make the item center vertically, justify between, and padding of y2, and for smaller devices and larger, make the padding of y0. And within it, we're going to create a anchor tag. I'm going to add my name here. Let's define a class name of text-xl and font-bold transitions-colors text-neutral 400 and make the hover text-white. Okay, now when we start hovering our mouse over our name, we can see a beautiful transition going on. Let's define the href and let's say /, which means we start referring to our current page. Now under the a tag, I'm going to create a button, and this button will render an image. And this image definitely have a source, which is going to have a menu icon in here. And whenever the user start clicking on it, it is going to show some sort of navigations. And for the desktop mode, it will going to be a simple navigation in a text way. Okay, now for the SRC, I'm going to give a assets/menu.svg with the class name of W6 and H-6. As you can see, the menu is appeared on the top. Now we need to create state. As you can see, whenever I click on the icon, it doesn't do anything. So let's create a use state in here. Let's start with false. I'm gonna say cons is open, set is open. Oh, there is a mistake in typo. It should be const. Okay, now let's add the state to our image. So in the SRC, we're gonna say if it is open, show me the cross sign, which is assets close.svg, and otherwise show assets/menu.svg. And whenever I click on the icon, it doesn't work it yet because it needs an event. So for that, in the button, I'm gonna create a onClick, and we're gonna call a arrow function to make the set is open to opposite of the is open. Now let's give it a class name flex cursor pointer, and for the color, let's give it a text-neutral 400, and for the hover, let's say text-white, and let's do the focus as well. Let's say outline none, and for smaller up to larger devices, make it hidden. Okay, now we need to create the navigation below this button. So in here, I'm going to say nav element with the class name of hidden, and for desktop view, make it flex. It means show it. So right at the top, right exactly above the nav bar, I'm going to create a function navigation, and it is just going to have a simple return. And in here, we're going to say UL tag with the class name of nav-ul. And within this, we're going to say li with the class name of nav-li. And inside the li tag, we're going to have an anchor tag, for example, home. Now let's give it a class name of nav-link. And I'm going to go ahead and select all of this li and duplicate them and contact. Here we go. Now let's define the component within the nav. Now let's say navigation. Okay, as you can see, we haven't already defined the mobile version, but it is for the desktop view. As you can see, whenever I make the screen bigger, you can see the navigation appears. Now we need to create for the mobile version, which is very simple. Below this to div 1, 2, I'm going to create a div, and this div can have a class name of block and make it overflow hidden, text-center, and sm hidden. Now within this div, we're going to create a nav element with the class name of padding of bottom-5, and within it, we're going to add the navigation component. Here we go. Okay, now we need to define whenever the user clicks on the icon, show this navigation. Otherwise, hide it. So I'm going to use the ternary if again. So in here, I'm just going to say, if it is open, show this, otherwise do nothing. Here we go. Okay, now we can add a little bit of spice to make it even beautiful. So I'm going to head to Motion website, docs, and let's run the npm install motion in our console. Back to VS Code, open up the terminal and execute npm install motion. Okay, once it is installed, I'm going to go ahead and import motion from Motion React. Here we go. Now let's copy this and select the div. As you can see right here, motion can be attached to any HTML5 tag elements. Paste it right over here. Motion itself has its own properties that we can use for animation. For example, these two props that we always gonna use. Initial one representing what should I do before starting the animation. An animate prop is simply starting the animation. Okay, now we are starting with initial prop. We're gonna say initial opacity of 0 and translate x of -10. And let's add the animate property. We're gonna say opacity of 1 and make the translate x to 0 in order to make it right back in. And let's give it a style as well. maximum height of 100 viewport height. And for the transition, we're going to say duration of 1 second. Okay, now whenever the button is clicked, you can see the smooth animation gonna happen. Okay, now we are done with the nav component, and let's navigate to app component here. And the next section that we're gonna build is the hero section. Okay, now let's open up the Explorer. Now in the sections folder, I'm gonna create a hero.jsx file. Now in here, I'm gonna run refce. I'm gonna remove the import one, and let's add the hero component into our app.jsx. All right, here we go. Now let's back to hero.jsx, and let's close the Explorer. I'm going to convert this into a section, and let's give it a class name of flex and put the item start, and let's say justify center, and for medium and large devices make the item start, and also give it a justify start, min dash h dash screen, overflow hidden, and see a space. Next is we are going to create a hero text component. So what I'm going to do is let's open up the Explorer first. Now let's create a components folder in src, and in this folder I'm going to call hero text.jsx. Within it I'm going to go ahead and run refce, and within this div I'm going to create a class name of z-10 and margin top -20 text-center and md margin top -40 md text-left rounded 3xl and bg-clip-text. And within it we're going to create two types of div. So one is for mobile view and the other one is the desktop view. So for the desktop view I'm going to create a div with a class name of flex call and make it hidden for mobile devices, and for desktop show it and c-space. And within this I'm going to create the h1 and I'm going to say hi, I'm Ali. Okay, in order to see this text I'm just going to go ahead and add this component into hero.jsx. So in this section I'm going to call hero text. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's head back to hero text.jsx. Once I make this bigger, you can see that the text has been appeared. So it is indicating that everything is working properly. Okay, now let's give it a class name of text-4xl and font-medium. Now below this h1, I'm going to create a div. And this div can have a class name of flex call, and item start. And within it, I'm going to create a p tag, and let's say a developer dedicated to crafting. All right, now let's break the line in here. Now within the p tag I'm gonna go ahead and give it a class name of text-5xl and font-medium text-neutral 300. And below this p tag I'm going to create a div, and within this div we're going to get a component from the Aceternity UI, which is called flip words. So I'm just going to add a comment here to remind us later. Now below this div tag, I'm going to create another p tag, and I'm going to say web solutions. Okay, now let's give it a class name of text-4xl and font-medium, and also give it a text-neutral 300. Here we go, perfect. For this div, I'm just going to go ahead to the Aceternity UI website, and let's say browse the components in here, and we just need to find the flip words. Okay, just press Ctrl F and search for flip words. Okay, here we go. Okay, now we're just going to use this component. There is actually two ways in order to get this component. First one is using the CLI, and the other method is the manual version that we're definitely going to use in this project. So in here, I'm just going to click the expand and select the JavaScript version. Once you select it, it gets copied. So now I'm just going to go ahead and open the Explorer, and in the components folder, I'm just going to create a flipwords.jsx. Now let's paste all the codes right here. All right, now we got to install some dependencies. The first one is the motion, which we have already installed it. And the other one is the Tailwind merge. So let's open up the console and let's run npm install Tailwind merge. Here we go. All right, once it is installed, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the cn with twmerge because cn is coming from the utils.ts. So let's remove this and let's say import twmerge from tailwind-merge. Here we go. Okay, let's copy that. And then I'm going to replace this cn with twmerge because we don't need this anymore. Okay, now let's remove this text colors and the padding as well. All right, now let's import this component into herotext.jsx. Just like so. Flip words. Okay, now obviously it's gonna give us an error because flip words has some kind of property that need to be populated. So in here, I'm gonna say words is equals to an array of secure and modern, and also say scalable. Now let's save it. And if I refresh the page, you can see the result right here. It is good, but it needs some styling. So in here, I'm just gonna give it a class name of font-black to make it bolder. And let's say text-white and text-8XL. Here we go. This is beautiful now. We have completed the desktop view, and let's go ahead and create the mobile version. So let's close this div, and here I'm going to create another div. So let's give it a class name of, okay, you know what? Let me make this browser smaller in order to see the mobile view. All right, now in here, let's give it a class name of flex-col space-6 md hidden. Now inside this div, I'm going to create a p tag, and let's say, hi, I'm Ali. And this p tag can have a class name of text-4xl and font-medium. And below this p tag, I'm going to create a div. And also inside this div, I'm going to create a p tag, and let's say building. Now again, under the p tag, let's define a div. We're gonna add our own flipwords component here. Now, below this div, let's again create a p tag, and let's say web applications. Now, let's do some styling. For the first paragraph, I'm gonna say class name of text-5xl and font-black text-neutral 300. And for the third paragraph, let's say class name of text-4xl and font-black and text-neutral 300. Now let's add the flipwords component here. All right, here we go. Okay, now for the properties, I'm just gonna go ahead and open this div and just simply copy these words prop and paste it over here. Now you can see the flipping words. All right, now we can define some sort of class name. So let's say font-bold text-white text-7xl. So far, we have done a pretty good job, but there is a minor issue here, which is we are repeating ourselves. So in order to fix this, let's go ahead and define a field for this prop. So right at the top, I'm gonna say const words equals to brackets, which means a array. And let's just copy this and paste it right here. And let's remove the curly braces, and let's copy the words and paste it right here inside a curly brace. All right, now we are done with this. Now the last thing that we need to do for our hero text component is to add an animation to it. So let's do this. So here I'm just going to import motion from motion React. Now I'm just going to go ahead and select the h1 tags and attach the motion here. So let's select the paragraphs. Let's add the motion dot, and I'm just going to copy this, and let's select the divs and paste it out over here. and for the paragraphs as well. Now we're going to do the same thing for the mobile view. So let's select the paragraphs, and for this one as well, and for this div, and then lastly for this paragraph. Okay, next, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say here initial with the opacity of 0 and translate x of -50. And let's give it a animate with the opacity of 1 and translate x of 0. And let's give it a transition with the delay of 1 second. All right, so let's make this browser bigger in order to see the animation. Once I start refreshing the page after 1 second, the h1 tag will appear. Now we need to duplicate this for all of our motion that we have added. So let's copy this and paste it right here after the class name. And let's change the delay to 1.2 seconds. Beautiful, you can see that first the h1 tag appears, and after 0.2 seconds later, the paragraphs pops up. So here we gotta duplicate ourselves again, but Motion team has thought about that as well. Motion has a property which is called variance that allows us to centralize our animations in a field. So let's define that. Right on top of here, I'm going to create a const variance is equals to an object. Oh, you know what, guys? I realized that I have defined my variables globally. So let's make them locally by moving them into the hero text function. So in here, I'm going to say const variance is equals to an object which has a hidden property. Let me mention this. You can add whatever name that you want. Okay, for example, banana. But I'm going to create a name that actually makes sense here. This hidden property is an object again. And let's say visible in here. Okay, let's copy this and paste it right over here. And let's do it again on the visible too. Right now, we have our own variance. In the h1 tag, I'm going to call variance. I'm just going to copy that and paste it right here. And then I'm going to say as a string, initials is equals to a hidden. And also for the visible as well. So let's copy this and paste it right here. Okay, now I'm just going to copy the whole thing here and paste it to the motions that we just created. Let's make the delay 1.5. And in here, paste it again and make this 1.8. Here we go. Now you can see a beautiful effect right now. Now let's do this for the mobile version as well. So I'm just going to close the desktop one. And in here, after the class name, I'm going to paste it right here. Make the transition delay of 1. And also let's apply this for the p tag as well, 1.2 second. And for the flip words, I'm going to say 1.5. And for the last paragraph, I'm going to say 1.8 again. All right, let's refresh it. Here we go. Now we have created this beautiful yet simple animation, which definitely makes the website look high level. The next thing that we got to do is to create a parallax background. So for that, I'm going to head back to hero.jsx. In here, we're going to add it later. So let's open up the Explorer, and inside the components, I'm going to go ahead and create a parallax background.jsx. Now let's run refce and let's add this to the hero component. Okay. Now let's close up some of the tabs that we don't need to. Okay, now let's convert this div into a section. And inside this section, we're gonna add a div. Okay, let's define a class name for our section of absolute inset-0 bg-black over 40, which means make the opacity 40. Now let's give it a class name of relative h-screen overflow -y-hidden. Okay, now once we've done that, we are ready for adding the background images. Within this div, I'm going to create a closing tag div. And I'm just gonna go ahead and duplicate them for 5 times. Here we go. And the first div is for background sky, and the other one is for mountain layer 3 planets. This would be a mountain layer 2, and the last one would be the mountain layer 1. Okay, now for this div, I'm going to give it a class name of absolute inset-0 w-full h-screen and -z-50. And let's also give it a style of background image, and let's say URL, and get it from the assets sky.jpg. Here we go. Now let's give it a background position of bottom. Let's also say background size cover. Next, for the mountain layer 3 div, I'm gonna give it a class name of absolute inset-0 -z-40. Each and every time we are increasing the z index number because we are putting the new images in front of the previous images. Okay, now let's copy the styles and apply it to this div. Here we go. Now let's change the sky to the mountain-3.png. Here we go. Okay, now let's copy this and paste it for the planets div. And let's change the z index to -30, and let's change it to planets. Okay, now we have added the planets. Next, again, we're gonna copy this and paste it right here. And let's say mountain-2.png. Okay, now we have added this. Now let's change the index to 20. Now finally, for the last part, I'm just gonna paste it here, and let's make this 10 and change the planets to mountain-1.png. Here we go. All right, the final step that we need to take to finish this component, you guessed it, is the scrolling animation. So we got to use frame of motion. There are 2 types of scrolling animation in motion. One is scroll trigger, which means a normal animation is triggered when an element enters the viewport. And the other one is scroll linked, which means values are linked directly to scroll progress. As you can see in this example, the scale X property is linked to scroll progress. You can achieve this simply by using useScrollHook. In this case, for the parallax effect, we're gonna use this. Let's go ahead and add the useScrollHook. First, I'll describe a const called scrollWhyProgress, which will be an object returned by the useScrollHook. Next, let's remove the input React statement and add the motion at the top right next to the useScroll. Now down below, let's define another const called mountain3y, where y stands for the y-axis, since we will use this for styling. We will set it equal to useTransformHook, which is also from motion. For the arguments of useTransform, we'll pass the scrollWhyProgress value. And for the input range, I'm gonna say 0 to 0.5, which represent the scroll progress from 0% to 50%. And for the output range, 0% to 70% for mountain3y. And let's fix the typo here. This syntax essentially means when scrollWhyProgress is 0%, mountain3y will also be at 0%. When scrollWhyProgress reaches 50%, mountain3y will move 70% along the y-axis. Okay, let's duplicate it for 4 times, and let's rename the mountain3y to planets x, and for the next one, let's say mountain2y, and finally mountain1y. And also let's redefine the output ranges. For the planets, let's say -20%, and for the mountains, 30%, and finally 0%. Okay, now we need to attach motion to our div elements. For the background sky, we are not gonna append motion to it because it is the furthest one. When something is far away, it is less likely going to move on your viewport. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and add the translate Y, and let's say mountain 3Y. Let's append the motion to the div, and for the planets as well. And let's add the X and planets X. And let's say motion.div again, and let's say Y, mountain 2Y. And motion.div, Y, mountain 1Y. All right. Okay, let's check why it is not showing anything. So I'm just gonna go ahead and open up the div panel. And it is saying that the input and output ranges must be the same length. Oh, look at that. I put the numbers in one string. So let's fix that. Okay, now let's refresh the page. Here we go. Now when I'm scrolling down, it is not working because we don't have enough room to scroll down. So let's create that. So in the app.jsx, below the hero section, I'm just gonna create a section and let's give it a class name of main-screen. And let's go ahead and duplicate those. Those sections are just a preview. Later on, we're gonna delete those. So okay, here we go. Now we have the parallax effect going on. We also can add a little bit of spice to it by making it a springy effect while you're scrolling up and down. So for that, let's head back to the parallax background.jsx. Okay, now right at the top, right in here, I'm gonna say const x. X is just a name, okay? So I'm gonna say spring, use spring, scroll y progress, and damping of 50. Okay, now let's go ahead and replace the scroll y progress in the use transform with the x. There we go. Now we have a springy effect. All right. The next thing that we need to build is the 3D model that actually falling from the sky. So for that, I'm going to create a figure with a class name of absolute insert-0. And let's also give it a style of width of 100 viewport view and the height of 100 viewport height. Now within it, we're going to create the 3D model. So before I'm going to create the 3D model, we need to install some packages. So for that, I'm going to open up the console, npm install 3 at React-3/fiber. And let's also say @React-3/Drei. And also do the React responsive in order to make our 3D model responsive. And let's also give it a math. This actually helps us to animate the 3D model pretty easily. All right. Once it is installed, within the figure, I'm going to go ahead and create a canvas, which is coming from React Three Fiber. Now within the canvas, we got to add our 3D model. Let's create a component which is called astronaut. So let's open up the Explorer, and inside the components folder, I'm going to go ahead and create the astronaut.jsx. Now let's run RFCE. Now let's add the astronaut component to our hero.jsx. All right, now we need to find the appropriate 3D model. So for that, I'm just going to go ahead to the Sketchfab website, and right at the top, I'm going to search for the spaceman. As you can see, there are a bunch of astronaut models here. Some of them are free, while others are not. Look at how amazing they are. For this project, we will use this one because, as you can see, it's free. Let's click on it. Give it a shout out to the creator and make sure to follow him. Once you have selected, go ahead and download the GLB file with the 2K version. After downloading, extract the file into your public folder. If you want the model immediately, you can find it along with the public folder in my GitHub repository. Next, we need to convert the GLB file to JSX. So to do this, head over to this website and simply drag and drop the GLB file here. All right, now you can see the JSX codes from the GLB. Let's open this up, and on the path prefix, we're gonna give the location of the GLB file, which is inside the public models folder. Now you can see it is referencing to the model. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy all of this Now let's head back to the astronaut.jsx and paste it right over here. And right at the top, I'm going to change the model method to astronaut. And let's refresh it. Okay, every time you see this error, which is not provided exported default, you just gotta go ahead and remove the astronaut component and also the import astronaut. And now within the canvas, I'm just gonna go ahead and add the astronaut component again. The next thing that I'm gonna do is, oh, by the way, if you want to make this draggable, React Three Drei, which is a helper of React Three Fiber, has a component called Orbit Control. Let's add this. You can now simply drag it around by just providing a component. Now let's head back to astronaut.jsx, refresh it, and let's add the models animation. Okay, after the use animation hook, I'm just gonna go ahead and create a use effect hook, call the callback function here, and let's say whenever you have the actions and the animations. All right, here we're gonna say if animations.length was more than 0, I'm gonna say here actions and animations 0.name. Choose this animation and I'm gonna say play it. Okay, now we have defined the animations. All right, the next thing that we gotta do is to define the rotations and scales and positioning of the model. All right, down below, I'm just going to select the rotations and scale. I'm just gonna move it to the parent layer, which is the outer group. Okay, now I'm gonna using the props here for getting the values from the outside. Let's define the rotation here first. So I'm gonna change this 0 to -0.2 and 2.2. And for the scales, we're gonna say props.scale. And if it doesn't have any values, use the default one, which is 0.3. And after that, I'm gonna define a position here. And let's say props.position. If it doesn't have any values, I'm going to use the default one. So which is 1.3, -1, and 0. Here we go. So I'm just going to head back to hero.jsx and apply the properties here by saying the scale, and let's say 0.3, and let's also say position of 0, -1.5, and 0. Okay, now let's give it a camera position here. So I'm just going to say camera is equals to an object, and I'm going to say position 0, 1, 3. There we go. We are getting close. Oh, I made a mistake here. Instead of a parenthesis, we need to add the brackets here. Let's change that to the brackets. Now it is perfect. As you can see, this is for the mobile version. So whenever I make my browser to desktop mode, you can see the model is still right there. So we don't want that. We need to apply some sort of different coordinates. So for that, I'm going to use React Responsive. So below this hero text, I'm just going to call const is mobile, and I'm going to say use media query, which is from React Responsive. And let's say max width with the 853 pixels. It means from 0 to 853 pixels, use this mobile version. And for the scales, I'm just gonna say, if the mobile is true, use this scale. And for the position, I'm just gonna copy this and paste it here. For conclusion, it is saying that if is mobile is between the range of 0 to 853 pixels, use these values. Otherwise, use the values that we have defined in the astronauts, which is right here. Okay, let's try this out. Now let's make it bigger, as you can see. Okay, now it is working perfectly. Nicely done. Now, the next thing that we gotta do is to create the falling animation effect. So for that, I'm just gonna head back to astronaut.jsx, and below this use effect, I'm going to use frame emotion here. So in here, I'm going to say const y position, use motion value hook from the frame emotion. And let's say start with 5. And then down below, I'm going to create a smoothing animation effect. So I'm going to say ySpring is equals to uSpring hook, and let's say y position, and let's say damping of 30. Oh, there's a typo error. Okay, now let's use the useEffect hook, and let's say whenever you have ySpring value, enter this function. So within the curly braces, I'm going to say ySpring.set to -1. It means, so in here, it means initial the animation from 5, which is on top right here, and slowly come to -1, which is the current position, as you can see right in here. Okay, now I'm going to use useFrame here from React Three Fiber in order to apply this effect to our 3D model. So in here, I'm just going to create a callback function. In here, I'm just going to say group.current.position.y is equals to ySpring.get. All right, here we go. You can actually play with this spring here. For example, you can remove the damping here, and it's going to be springy. It is up to you. You can manipulate this. I prefer this animation because it is smooth. All right. The next thing that we got to do is to define some sort of animation that actually reacts into your mouse movement. So let's create this. Let's head back to the hero.jsx. We got to create a component. In here, I'm going to say function. I'm going to call rig. And then let's say return use frame. And within it, I'm just going to create a callback function. And for the arguments, I'm just going to say, let's take state and the delta as well. And within it, I'm going to call easing from math.damp3. And let's take a state.camera.position. We are going to change the camera position based on our mouse movement. So let's say state.mouse.x position and make it smooth. And also let's say 1 plus state.mouse.y over 10. And for the z index, we just say stay at 3. And for the smooth time, I'm going to give it a 0.5. And at the end, I'm going to say delta. Oh, let's add this semicolon at the end. All right. Now let's add the rig within the canvas. So inside it, I'm just going to call rig. Now, once I hover my mouse over the object, you can see it going to react based on my mouse movement. There is something we can add to enhance the current animation. Inside the canvas, I'm going to wrap the astronaut component inside a float component, which comes from Drei. Make the astronaut appear more dynamic and engaging. Finally, to complete the hero section, let's add a loading state. This is important because when a user refreshes a page, it might take some time to download the 3D model. By adding a loading indicator, users will know that something is being loaded and will appear shortly. This improves the user experience and ensures they don't think the page is broken or empty. Alright, for this I'll use suspense, which is also from React 3 Drei. I'm going to wrap the float component inside a suspense component. The suspense component has a property called fallback, where we can pass a loader component that we will create in a moment. So I'm going to say fallback equals to a loader component. Let's save the changes. As you can see, everything is broken right now because we haven't created the loader component yet. To fix this, let's open the Explorer and navigate to the components folder. I'll create a new file called loader.jsx. And in here, I'm going to run refce. And let's clean up the import React because it is no longer necessary. Next, I'll replace the div with an HTML component, which comes from React 3 Drei again. This component allows us to use HTML tags inside the canvas. Now, in here, I'm going to say const progress equals to use progress from React 3 Drei. Now let's copy this and paste it right here. And let's say percentage loaded. Let's save it. Now let's also make it center. Okay, let's head back to hero.jsx. It is using the React 3 Drei loader component. So let's delete this and let's say, please use my loader. Here we go. As you can see, whenever I refresh the page, you can see the number. I'm going to make it, uppercase. That's better. We can also give it a class name of font-black make it bolder, and also let's try text-8XL. How about 2XL? No, I'm not with the 2XL. How about XL? Yeah, that's better. Now let's add the text-center to make it center. And also let's change the font-black to font-bold. No, let's try the normal one. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And there we go. We finally completed the hero section where we have integrated a responsive 3D model and a parallax background. As users scroll down, they'll experience a smooth, immersive effect that adds depth and interactivity to the page. It's a great way to make the website feel dynamic and engaging. Now let's move on to the next section, which is the About Me section. Instead of using plain text, which can be boring, we'll create this section using a bento grid design. This modern and visually appealing layout will make the content more engaging and interactive for users. Let's get started. All right, so let's open up the Explorer. And in the section folder, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. And I'm going to call it about.jsx. And over here, I'm going to run our AFCE. And let's close up some of the tabs that we don't need to. And let's go ahead and add the about.jsx into our app component. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the one of the sections here. And let's add a self-closing about component. Here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the comment. And inside this component, I'm going to go ahead and remove the import one and replace the div with the section. And also let's give it a class name of c-space and section-spacing. Section spacing is just normally defining the minimum height and also providing the margin top. Now within the section, I'm going to go ahead and create a h2 tag, and I'm going to call about me, as you can see right here. Also, we can also give it a class name of text-heading. And below it, I'm going to go ahead and create a div with a class name of grid -calls-1, and also gap-4. And for medium and large devices, make the grid-calls-6, and as well as make it auto-rows-80 rem. And let's give it a margin top 12 as well. Now within it, I'm going to create another div. So I'm going to go ahead and call this grid1. Now for this div, let's give it a class name of flex items and grid-default-color, which is a custom Tailwind CSS that providing a gradient color to our grid. And let's also give it a grid-1, which is also again a custom Tailwind CSS. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and provide a grid2, and let's say div with a class name of grid-default-color and grid-2. There we go. Now let's create a grid3 as well. Let's say div. You know what? I'm just going to copy this and paste it right here and make this grid3. And let's go ahead and copy all of this and duplicate it for 2 times. There we go. And make the grids 4 and 5. There we go. Now we have defined the grid layouts. The next, we need to change the colors. So for the grid 4, I'm going to make the color special, which is a purplish color. And for the grid 3, I'm going to make it black. All right, now this is beautiful. If I make the browser bigger, you can see that we have created the beautiful bento grid layout. So the next thing that we got to do is to provide some details for each grid. So I'm going to start from grid 1, and in here I'm going to say image with a source of assets/coding-pov.png, and let's provide a class name of absolute with a scale of 1.75 and make it -right-5 rem. And we can also give it a -top-1 rem. And for medium and large devices, make the scale -3 and also make it left-50, and as well as inset-y-10. And for large devices, we make the scale up to 2.5. All right. Now we have made this responsive, so whenever I make my browser bigger, you can see that it is going to react. All right. So below this image, I'm going to go ahead and create another div, which is responsible to hold our text. And let's give it a class name of z-10. And within it, I'm going to say paragraph. And I'm going to say, hi, I'm Aceternity. And below this paragraph, let's create another one. And let's paste. And for the first paragraph, I'm going to give it a class name of head text. And for another one, I'm going to say subtext. All right. As you can see, the text has been overlapped with the background image. So in order to fix this confliction, below this div, I'm going to create a div with the class name of, you know what, let's make it, self-closing div. And let's say absolute inset x 0, and let's say pointer dash events dash none, and let's say minus bottom dash 4 and h-1/2, which means 50%. And for smaller and large devices, make it, and let's make the background gradient to top from indigo color to transparent. Yeah. As you can see, the text has its own background. Okay, now we are finished with the grid 1. We can also make it bigger to see the result. All right, let's move on to the grid 2. And within this div, I'm going to create a div with a class name of flex items. I'm going to scroll down. You can see the better items center, justify center, and w-full, h-full. All right. Now within it, I'm going to create a p tag, and let's give it a class name of flex items end text-5xl, and also text-gray-500. And in here, I'm going to say code is craft. For this section, we will create another component called card. This component will allow users to interact with it by dragging and moving around the screen. Let me show you what I mean. Now let's open up the Explorer, and in the components folder, I will start by creating a new file, which is called cart.jsx. Now, in this component, I'm going to run refce. Let's remove the import one. And I'm going to go ahead and add the cart in here. All right, let's head back to cart.jsx. All right, I'm going to give this div a class name of absolute and padding x-1, padding y-4, and text-xl, and text-center, rounded-full, ring-gray-700, and font-extra light. And let's give it a background color. So I'm going to say bg-storm, w-12 rim, and finally cursor dash grab. So for the example purposes, in here, I'm just going to say design pattern. You can see that it is now grabbable. It looks like a button, but it is grabbable. The reason why I make this grabbable because later on we're going to add a drag properties from the motion. And the next thing that we got to do is we need to make this text dynamic so that we can add our desirable text from the outside. So in here, I'm just going to say text. Okay, now let's replace it with text in here. Let's head back to about the JSX and let's add the text property in here. Now I'm going to say grasp, and I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate it several times. For example, I'm just going to add solid. For example, the other one is design patterns, design principles. For example, I'm going to say SRP. All right, now you can see that they are stacked on each other, so we need to give it some styling here. So in order to do that, I'm just going to head back to cart.jsx and add the style property here in order to spread them out. And I'm just going to copy the style, and after the class name, I'm just going to paste it here. And let's head back to about component. And in here, I'm going to say style of rotate For example, 75 degree. All right. Now let's say top of 30% and left of 20%. Okay. Now let's copy this and paste it for another card. And let's change the properties. For example, I'm going to say minus 30 degree, 60%. And in here, I'm going to say 45%. Now let's paste for the design pattern. Now for the rotation, I'm going to say 90 degree. And I'm going to replace the top with bottom. And for the left, I'm going to say 70%. Okay, now paste it for the next one. And rotation, I'm going to say minus 45 degree and 55% and 0%. And finally, rotation of 20 degree, 10% and 30%. I'm going to make 38. Yeah, that's better. All right, as you can see, we have properly spread out the cards to make them feel more dynamic and interactive. We will add a drag property from frame of motion. But before we do that, I'll enhance the visual appeal by adding some framework icons such as C#, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, or any other you would like. This will give the cards a more polished and engaging look. To achieve this, I'll start by adding a property to the card component called image. This property will reference an image from our public folder. Inside the component, I'll use a ternary operator to handle the logic. If the image property has a reference and the text property is empty, we will render an image tag. Otherwise, we will default to rendering a div. Okay, for this image, I'm going to give it a class name of absolute w-15 and cursor-grab. And let's say src is equals to our image, not this image. All right, now let's head back to our about component. Now I'm going to duplicate this card, and in here, instead of text, I'm just going to say image is equals to assets / logos / c#-pink.png. All right, now let's give it a rotation of 30 degree, and for the top make it 70% and 70% for the left as well. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is to duplicating this, and for this, instead of C#, I'm just going to say .NET. Here we go. Now let's change the rotation to minus 45 degree. And for the top is okay. And for the left, I'm going to say 25%. And the reason why it's not working because we need to add the style in here. So I'm going to say style is equals to this style prop. All right, now for the last icon, I'm just going to duplicate it again. And in here, I'm just going to say Blazor, for example. Here we go. Now let's change the style. And for the top, I'm going to say 5% and left of 10%. All right, here we go. All right, the next step that we need to take is to make the cards draggable. So for that, let's head back to about.jsx. And right at the top, I'm going to say import motion from motion React. Next, I'll wrap both the image and the div elements with the motion component. For the image element, I'll add the while hover property from motion and set it to scale 1.05. This means that whenever a user hover over the image, it'll slightly scale up, creating a subtle interactive effect. I'll apply the same while hover property to the div element for consistency. Finally, to make the cards draggable, I'll add the drag property to both the image and the div components. This will allow user to click and drag the cards around the screen, adding a fun and interactive elements to the design. Right now, when users start grabbing and let it go of the object, it will go off the screen, which isn't ideal. To fix this, we need to apply some constraint to ensure the object stays within the screen bounds and bounces back when it reaches the edges. To achieve this, let's add a container ref props to our card component. This will reference the container that holds the card. Then for the image element, we will add the drag constraint property from motion and set it to container ref. This will restrict the image's movement to the boundaries of the container. We will apply the same drag constraint property to the motion div as well. This way the cards stay within the visible area and bounces back when they hit the edges, creating a more polished and user-friendly interaction. All right, now let's head back to about.jsx. Now for this div, I'm going to say ref is equals to grid2 container. Now let's define this grid2 container right at the top. I'm going to say use ref hook const grid2 container equals to use ref hook. All right. Now I'm just going to go ahead and add this grid2 container to my container ref property of my card. Now I'm just going to copy this and paste it for all of the available card in here. Now once you grab this and let it go, as you can see, it is going to bounce to the wall. All right. To make this interaction even more dynamic, we can add a bounce effect when the object hits the edges. For this, we will use the drag elastic property from motion. Setting the drag elastic to a value between 0 and 1 will create a spring-like bounce reaction when the object reaches the edges of the container. So in here, I'm going to say 1. So let's copy this and apply it for the motion div as well. And there we go. Grid 2 is now complete. User can view the code and interact with the cards by dragging them around. The combination of smooth drag functionality, bounce effects, and visual appeal makes this section both engaging and user-friendly. Beautiful. Let's head back to About Component. I'll collapse Grid 1 and Grid 2 to keep things organized. And now we will move on to the Grid 3. In this grid, we will add our location to let clients know where we are based and whether we are available for remote work worldwide. So within this div, I'm going to go ahead and create a div with a class name of z-10 $50%. And within it, I'm going to create a paragraph and just give it a class name of head text. And in here, I'm going to say time zone. Oh, this head text not got to be a camel case. It needs to be all lowercase. All right. Now below this p tag, I'm going to create another paragraph, and I'm going to say I'm based in Mars and open to remote work worldwide. Well, obviously you have to add your country instead of the Mars. So this paragraph can have a class name of subtext. Here we go. To make this grid visually engaging, we will include a 3D planet model. So below this div, I'm going to create a figure with the class name of absolute, left dash 30% and top dash 10%. Within this figure, we're going to add 3D planet model here. All right, in the Magic UI website, I'm going to go ahead and click on the icon and let's click on the globe. Today, we're going to use this globe in order to make our grid interactive and visual appealing. You guys already know that we are not going to use the CLI version. Instead, we are doing the manual way. So in the manual tab, it is saying that we got to install the code. So for that, I'm just going to open up the console and let's say npm install globe. All right. Oh, I'm sorry about that. npm install code. All right. Now, once it is installed, I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this code. And then let's open up the Explorer, and inside a components folder, I'm going to create a new file, which is called globe.jsx. And I'm going to paste it right here. Now in this component, what we are going to do is we are going to remove all of the TypeScript syntax. So here I'm going to remove the cope options, and let's go. Oh, I removed the equal accidentally. So let's add it again. All right. Now the string and then cope option as well. You know what? Let's remove all of this, and let's remove this one and this one too. In JSX, we don't need to use the exclamation point. So let's remove that. All right. Right at the top, I'm going to replace the CN with TW merge. So I'm going to say import TW merge from tailwind-merge. All right. Now let's search for the CNs and replace them all with TW merge. All right, here we go. Now let's do some modification on the classes as well. I'm going to remove the absolute and inset dash 0. And for the next class, I'm going to remove the size dash full and place it with size dash 30 rem. All right. Now let's head back to about the JSX and add it inside the figure. I'm going to say globe. Okay. Let's see if it is working or not. So let's open up the dev tool. It is saying that does not provide an export name cope option. All right. I think right at the top, yeah, right here. I'm just gonna remove this one. Let's refresh it. And let's open up again. Number isn't defined. So where is the number? Number at line 43. All right. Line 43. Yeah, it is right. useRef does not use this kind of syntax. So let's remove this. I'm going to say useRef null. And for the above one as well, remove this and make it null. All right. Now let's save it. Okay, I'm going to change the marker color as well to 1 in order to make it white. All right, here we go. As you can see, it is white right now and everything is working perfectly. All right, now we have completed the grid 3. Now let's move on to the grid 4. Now for the grid number 4, within this div, I'm going to create another div with a class name of flex col items center, justify center, and gap-4, and also say size-full. Now within this div, let's create another paragraph tag with a class name of text-center, and also give it a head text. All right. Now in here, I'm going to say, do you want to start a project together? We need to create a beautiful button in here. So for that, let's open up the Explorer. In the components folder, I'm going to create a new file, which is called copy email button.jsx. Now let's run refce. Let's go ahead and remove the import one, and let's add this component to our about.jsx. All right, now below this paragraph tag, I'm going to say copy email button. All right. Let's remove this div and let's say button, and let's give it a class name of relative, padding x-1 and padding x-4, text-sm, text-center, rounded-full, and font-extra light, and also say bg-primary. And let's add the width, w-12 rem, and cursor-pointer, and overflow-hidden. Now within this button, I'm going to create a paragraph, and I'm going to say copy email address. All right. Now let's add a class name of flex items center, justify center, gap-2. And inside this paragraph, I'm going to render an image. So let's give it a src of assets / copy.svg. Okay, now let's add the size in here. So let's say class name of w-5 and alt is equals to copy icon. All right, now we got to create a copy functionality to allow clients to copy our Gmail address. So for that, right at the top, I'm going to create a const, and I'm going to say copied set copied is equals to use state, and I'm going to say it false. Next line, I'm going to say const email. So in here, you got to put your email address here. Let's create a function here so that when clients click on the button, it gets copied to their clipboard. So in here, I'm going to say const copy to clipboard is equals to an arrow function. And I'm going to say navigator.clipboard.write text and put our email here. Now let's say set copied to true. And we can also set the timeout. I'm going to say set copy to false after 2 seconds. All right. Now in here, I'm going to create a on-click copy to clipboard. All right. So now whenever clients click on the button, you can see that it has been copied to our clipboard. All right. Next, we will enhance the button by making it dynamically change its text to email has been copied based on the state we created earlier. So in here, I'm going to create a paragraph, email has copied. Okay, and let's give it a class name of flex items center, justify center, gap-2. Now let's add the icon image here. I'm going to say src of assets copy -don.svg, which is a icon that has a tick on it. And let's give it a class name of w-5. And I'm going to say alt copy icon. All right, now let's select these two paragraphs, and I'm going to wrap this inside a ternary operator. So let's say if copy state was true, use email has copy. Otherwise, use copy email address. Here we go. As you can see, whenever you click on the button, it is going to change its state to email has copy. And it is saying that after 2 seconds, it'll reset. So the next thing that we need to do is make it animated. So in here, I'm going to say import motion from motion React. Now let's wrap these paragraphs with motion dot. So I'm going to say initial equals to opacity of 0 and translation of y minus 10. And let's add the animate with the opacity of 1 and translate y of 0. And let's say for the exit animation, I'm going to say opacity 0 and translate y of minus 10. And let's also say transition with the duration of 0.1 second. And let's add the ease in out. Let's add the comma here. All right, let's copy this and I'm going to go ahead and paste it right here. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the translation of y's. And also let's remove the is one. All right, now when I click the button, it doesn't work as expected. This is because we are using useState for the copied state. And React needs a way to detect when it's direct children. In this case, the p tags are removed from the React tree. To handle this properly, we will use animate presence from motion. But before we do that, we are going to wrap the button with the motion first. All right, now let's add the animate presence within the button. Let's say animate presence and add a mode of wait. Right now I'm going to copy this and I'm pasting it right here, right above the button. So for the p tag, I'm going to add a property called key so that animate presence can track their presence in the tree. So you can add whatever name you want, but it must be unique. So I'm going to say copied. And for another p tag, I'm going to say copy. All right, here we go. As you can see, the button is animated. So now right at the top for the button, I'm going to call while hover and I'm going to change the translate of y to -5. And while tap, change the scale to 1.05. So while you start hover over the button, you can see it is going to translate of -5. And whenever you start clicking on it, it is going to scale up. All right, we have now completed the contact read and it's time to move on to the next section. We will create a tech stack read to showcase the frameworks, languages, and tools we are familiar with. This grid will highlight our skills and expertise in a visually appealing way, making it easy for clients and visitors to understand our technical capabilities. Let's head back to about the JSX and I'm going to close the unnecessary tabs here. Within this div, let's create another div, and this div can have a class name of absolute, inset-y-0, md inset-y-9, w-full, h-full, start 50%, md scale-125. And within this, we will going to create a frameworks component later on. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the Explorer, and in the components folder, I'm going to create a new file. Let's say frameworks.jsx. All right. Now in here, I'm going to run refce. Now let's add it into about.jsx. All right. Now in the frameworks, we will add another components that is come from Magic UI. So in the Magic UI website, we will search for orbiting circles, and let's click on it. As you can see, we will use this in order to showcase our technical skills. I'm going to click the manual tab. We will copy this. Now in the components folder, I'll create a new file and I'm going to call it orbitingcircles.jsx. Now in here, I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. Now in here, I'm going to remove the interface and orbiting circle props, and also this one. Let's remove this imports again. I'm going to say import TW-merge from tailwind-merge. All right, now let's copy this and press Ctrl F, and I'm gonna replace cns with TW-merge. All right, there we go. Now let's head back to framework.jsx, and in here we're gonna use this UI. So let's copy this code and paste it right here. And right at the top, I'm going to convert the name. I'll convert this method name to frameworks. Let's remove these two, and we will add our own orbiting component. I'm going to do it by rewriting this. As you can see, it is added. And because this component doesn't have export default, in frameworks component, we got to wrap the imported frameworks with curly braces. Okay, it is already defined. Let's remove this. All right, let's save it. Now, when I scroll down, you can see orbiting circles. All right, now let's head back to frameworks.jsx. And in this component, you can see that it is defined some sort of icons in here as default. So let's remove these icons because we don't need this. We gotta add it our own icons later. So let's remove this orbiting circles children. Now in here, I'm gonna create a const method. It'll take a source and it'll return an image which have a source, and let's add the source. All right, now let's give it a class name of rounded dash sm, and let's say hover scale dash 110, and let's add the duration of 200 millisecond. All right, in here below the frameworks and above the return, I'm going to create arrays of scales. And in here, I'm going to say auth0, Blazor, and WordPress. All right, the skills we have defined here correspond to the file name in public assets logos. This setup allows us to dynamically iterate through each logo using the map method without having to manually write out each name. By matching the skill names to the logo's file name, we can efficiently load and display them in the text stack read, keeping our code clean and scalable. All right, within this, I'm gonna say scales.map. Let's define the arrow function here, and it'll take scale and index, and it'll return the icon. All right, let's remove the extra parentheses. All right, here we go. Now let's define the properties of key equals to index, and the source of assets slash logos, the scale.svg. All right, here we go. That was the outer circle. Now for the inner circle, I'm just gonna copy this and then I'm gonna paste it right here. All right, as you can see, since we have defined the reverse here, but the inner circle is not been reversed. So let's go ahead and check why it is not working. If I scroll down, you can see that it is using TypeScript syntax. So let's go ahead and convert this into JSX by using ternary operator. Right in here, I'm gonna say, if reverse is true, then use this. I'm just gonna copy this and paste it here. Otherwise, do nothing. Simple. Now as you can see, it is reversed. All right. Now let's remove some class names that we don't need to. So in here, I'm going to remove this one and the dark one as well. All right, now let's head back to frameworks.jsx. Now in this class name, we're gonna change the height to 15 rem. Here we go. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and remove the overflow hidden. All right, let's change the inner circle icon size to 25. All right, here we go. All right, now as you can see, when they are reaching at a certain point, they become similar. So we don't want that. So what we're gonna do to fix this, for the inner circle, I'm gonna add dot reverse. All right, here we go. They are not the same at all. Let's head back to about.jsx. Now in here, let's define some sort of text here. Okay, now within this div, let's create a div with a class name of z-10 and $50%. Now within this, let's define a paragraph and let's say text stack with a class name of head text. Now below this, let's create another paragraph and let's say with a class name of subtext. And in here, I'm going to say I specialize in a variety of languages, frameworks, and tools that allow me to build robust and scalable applications. And there we go. We have now completed the About Me section. As you can see, it features interactive cards that user can drag and explore, a rotatable 3D globe to showcase our global presence, and an eye-catching text tag that visually highlights our skills without overwhelming the user with details. This section is designed to be engaging, intuitive, and easy to navigate, ensuring user can focus on the content without any unnecessary effort. If you're still watching at this point, first of all, thank you. That means a lot. If you're enjoying it, consider giving it a like and subscribing. Also, let me know in the comments what kind of projects would you love to see next. Maybe a SaaS app, an e-commerce site, a landing page, or more 3D stuff. And hey, if there is anything I can improve, whether it is my explanation, pacing, or even my tone, I'm all ears. Thank you guys. Alright, now let's continue on the video. The next section we will build is the project section. In this section, we will showcase our projects in a way that encourages user interaction. When users hover over a project, they'll see an image preview which will spark their curiosity and encourage them to click and read more about the project. This interactive design will make the section more engaging and visually appealing. All right, first and foremost, let's open up the Explorer, and in the sections, I'm going to create a projects.js6. Note that I named this in plural way because it is going to contain a lot of projects in it. So in here, I'm going to run refce, and we will add this to app component. So let's press Ctrl P and search for app.js6. And in here, we will add the projects, and it'll automatically going to import the projects, and we will remove one of the sections and also the comment. All right. Now you can see the project in here. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and close up some of the unnecessary tabs. And we're going to import a folder which is called constant. So let's open up the Explorer, and I'll paste the constant in the src folder, which will contain index.js, which has some data that we need to work with. For example, for the projects.jsx, we will use the title, description, subdescription, tags, and so on. Let's close this. And for the footer section, we will use my social props and experience for experience section and reviews for testimonial. All right, let's close this up. Now let's go back to projects.jsx. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the React one, and let's import my projects from /constants. All right. Now it is identified. Now I'm going to go ahead and convert this div into a section, and let's give it a class name of relative c-space section-spacing. And within it, let's create a h2 tag. And in here, I'm going to say my selected projects. And let's give this a class name of text-heading. In the next line, I'm going to go ahead and create a self-closing div with a class name of bg-gradient-to-right from transparent via neutral-700. And let's say to-transparent. And let's add the margin top of 12 with h of 1 pixel and w-full. All right. Now you can see that a line has appeared right here. Now below this div, let's go ahead and say my projects.map, and let's define a callback function which it'll take a single project. And in here, it is going to return a component called projects.jsx. So for that, let's open up the Explorer, and in the components folder, I will create a file called projects.jsx. Note that I named it singular, just like opposite of the projects.jsx, which is plural. In project.jsx, I'll run refce, and I'm going to go ahead and add this to projects.jsx. Here we go. Let's add the key equals to project.id. Let's head back to project.jsx, and for this div, I'm going to give this a class name of flex-wrap. Item center, justify-between. I'm going to say padding of y of 10, space dash y-14, and sm flex and sm space dash y-0. All right, now within this div, Let's define a paragraph. We will going to say title. And let's give it a class name of text-2xl. And for the next line, I'm going to say div. And within this div, let's define a span. And I'm going to say tag1. Let's duplicate this. I'm going to name it tag2 and tag3. Remember, these are dummy text. Later on, we're going to replace them with the real data. And give it a class name of flex, gap-5, margin top 2, and text-sand. All right, let's go ahead and create a button, and this button will render an image. I'm going to say src of assets/arrow.right.svg, arrow-right.svg. And let's give this a class name of w-5. And before this, I'm going to say read more. Let's give this button a class name of flex, items center, and gap-1, cursor-pointer, hover-animation. All right, there we go. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to wrap paragraphs and div below inside a div. All right, let's make the browser bigger. Okay, this is not working because, right here, justify baseline, I said. It must be justified between. All right, how about now? Yes, it is working properly right now. Next, we need to create line below each project. So below this div, let's create a self-closing div. It is not working because it needs to be within the React fragment. So just add it. And for this div, I'm going to give this a class name of bg gradient-2-r from transparent via neutral 700 2-transparent h-1 pixel and w-full. All right, there we go. Now let's populate this component with real data. Head back to projects.jsx. If you hover over this, you will notice some data that needs to be passed to project.jsx. To achieve this, I'll use the spread operator to efficiently pass all the necessary properties. Let's head back to project.jsx and add those properties there. So in here, I'm going to say title, description, subdescription, href, image, and tags. And let's define the title here. Then I'll remove the span elements and replace them with tags. If you take a look at index.js, you will notice that tags is an array of objects where each object contains a framework name and its related image. So let's head back to project.js, and within this div, I'm going to say tags.map. Let's define a function here, and it'll return a span and takes the tag. And let's say key is equals to tag.id, and within it, I'm going to say tag.name. All right. So let's wrap this properties inside a curly braces. All right, now let's save it. If I scroll down, you can see the projects right here. All right, the next thing that we need to do when our user clicks on the read more button, I just want to show a pop-up modal here in order to see more detail about the specific project. So for that, we need to create another component. Let's go ahead and open up our Explorer, and in the components folder, I'm going to say project details.jsx. Let's hit enter, and in here I'm going to run refce, and I'm going to go ahead and add this into our project.jsx. And here I'm going to say title equals to title, description equals to description, and subdescription is equals to subdescription. Image is equals to image, and tags equals to tags, and finally href equals to href. Now let's define those properties. So in here I'm going to add a object of title, description, subdescription, image, tags, and href. All right. Now for this div, let's give this a class name of fixed inset-0 z-50 flex item center justify center and w-full h-full and overflow-hidden backdrop-blur-sm. All right, now within this div, let's give give it another div with a class name of relative max-w-2xl border shadow-sm rounded-2xl bg-gradient-2-left from midnight to navy. And let's say border-white with the opacity of 10. Now inside this div, let's create a button with the image that has a src of assets slash close.svg with a class name of w-6 and height-6. All right, now let's give button a class name of absolute p-2 rounded-sm top-5 right-5 bg-midnight hover bg-grade-500. So below the button, let's create an image, a src of image. All right, this is our preview image, and let's add an alternative of title. All right, also give this a class name of w-full rounded-t-2xl. Now below this image, let's create another div, and within it I'm gonna define a h5 tag and a paragraph tag. And within the h5 tag I'm gonna say title, and for the paragraph I'm gonna say description. And the next line I'm gonna say subdescription.map, and I'm gonna create a arrow function. It'll take a subdisk and an index, and it'll return a p element, and within it I'm gonna say subdisk. All right, now let's give this div a class name of padding-5, and for the h5 I'm gonna give it a class name of margin button-2 text-2xl font-bold text-white. And for the paragraph I'm going to give it a class name of margin button-3 font-normal text-neutral -400. I'm just going to copy this, and for another p tag I'm going to create a class name and I paste it here. All right, now in here I'm going to create another div with a class name of flex items center justify between margin top-4, and within it I'm going to create another div, and in here I'm gonna iterate through tags. So let's say tags.map. Here let's create a function and it'll return an image. It'll take a tag. So let's define a key equals to tag.id and source of tag.path. Let's say alt equals to tag.name. Now let's add a class name of rounded-lg size-10 hover-animation. All right, now for this div, let's give it a class name of flex and gap-3. Below this div, I'm going to create a anchor tag, and in here I'm going to say view project, and let's define an image with a source of assets slash arrow-up.svg. And let's define a class name of size-4. Now let's define a class name for the anchor tag. So in here I'm going to say class name of inline-flex items-center gap-1 font-medium. Finally, I'm going to say hover-animation. Let's also add cursor-pointer to the tags, and then we need to set the href attribute to href. Next, we will define an event to close the model right here. For the button, I'll add an onClick event, and we will populate its functionality outside of this component. To achieve this, I'll define a property called closeModel, which will take a method as its value. So let's copy this and paste it here. All right, now let's head back to project.jsx. At the top of the file, we will create a state to manage the model's open or close behavior. So in here, I'm going to say const is hidden, set is hidden is equals to useState for false. And I'm just going to copy this. And for the button, I'm going to say onClick, and let's invoke the method and set it to true. All right. Let's call the close model property here. And in here, I'm going to say set is hidden to false. All right, right now it is not working because we need to wrap this entire component inside a ternary if. In here, I'm going to say if is hidden is true, make it hidden. All right, now whenever you click on the read more button, it'll pop up. And now if you click on the close button, it'll close. Simple enough. Next, let's apply pop-up animation to our model by heading back to our projects.jsx. In here, right above the const, I'm going to go ahead and import motion from motion/react. All right, let's copy this and let's close the divs. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap the inner div with motion. And now we can say initial with the opacity of 0 and scale of 0.5. And let's add animate property with the opacity of 1 and scale of 1. And now when you click on the read more button, you can see the pop-up animation. All right, beautiful. Now we have completed the project details component. Let's close up some unnecessary tabs. Then head back to project.jsx. All right, as you know, we are done with the project details. So the last thing that we need to do is to add a small preview image that follows your mouse cursor in order to showcase the preview image of the specific project. In order to create this, we need to head back to projects.jsx, and in this component, we got to create a small preview image here by adding a image tag right below this iteration. And let's add the class name of fixed, make it top-0, left-0, and the index of 50, make the object-cover, h-56, rounded-lg, shadow-lg, and pointer-events-none, and w-80. All right, now you can see a border like has been appeared on top left corner. What we're gonna do next is that we're gonna make this rectangle stick to our mouse cursor. For that, we're gonna use motion. So right at the top, I'm going to import motion from motion/react. And let's wrap the image element with the motion. Once you've done, right above this return, I'm gonna go ahead and say const x equals to use motion value. I'm gonna start with 0, and let's copy this and add it to the import. All right, now let's do the another one for the y position. I'm just gonna go ahead and say const y is equals to motion value of 0. All right, now let's add some sort of springy effect to our x and y axis. In here, I'm gonna say const spring x is equals to use spring. Let's add the use spring to our import. All right, I don't know why my auto detect is not working, but anyway. So within the parentheses, I'm gonna say x, and let's say damping of 10 and stiffness of 50. And let's say const spring y is equals to use spring. Y damping. Oh, I forgot the M for the top one. Damping, oh my God. All right, damping 10 and stiffness of 50. All right. Now that we have defined the animation values, let's apply them to the motion.image element. By using these values, we can make this image move along with the mouse cursor, creating a dynamic and interactive effect that enhances the user experience. So in here, I'm going to say style equals to x spring x, and also say y of spring y. Next, we will create a function to track the mouse position and update the x and y values of our motion element. This will allow the image to follow the mouse cursor. So in here, I'm going to say const handle mouse move. It'll take an event, and I'm going to say x.set e.client x plus 20. And let's define for the y position as well. I'm going to change the x's to y's. The reason why I added 20 is that to make the positioning better. Let's copy this function and add on mouse move events to the section, setting it equals to handle mouse move. Now, whenever your mouse cursor enters a section, the rectangle will start following your cursor. Next, we need to display an image preview of the project at the mouse cursor's current position. To achieve this, we will first need to fetch the image from the project component. For that, I'll create a state by writing const preview and set preview equals to useState null. All right. Then for the project component, we need to define a new property which is called setPreview equals to setPreview method. All right. Let's head back to project.jsx. And in here, I'm going to add the setPreview here. All right, now let's copy this. And in here, I'm going to say on mouse enter, and let's invoke that method. So I'm going to say auto function setPreview. And we're going to set that image, which is the current image of the project. Now, whenever the mouse is leaving, we're going to say set preview to null. All right. So let's head back to project.jsx. We need to set the preview within the image. So in here, I'm going to say src is equals to preview. Oh, I mistyped the preview. Let's fix that. All right. Now, when your mouse cursor enters the project section, it will display the preview image of the corresponding project. When the mouse cursor leaves the section, the rectangle or preview image should be hidden. I'm going to wrap this motion.image tag inside a ternary operator by saying, if it has preview, show this tag, otherwise do nothing. As you can see, whenever it enters the project section, it is going to show the preview image. All right, now as you can see, everything is working smoothly and perfectly, creating a clean and interactive user experience, ensuring the preview only appears when relevant. All right, we have now completed the project sections. The next step is to create a new section called the work experience section. First, let's open up the Explorer and navigate to the sections folder. In here, we'll create a new file called experiences.jsx and run refc here. After that, we will import and add this component to app.jsx so it becomes part of our application. Now let's remove one of the sections here and let's head back to experiences.jsx, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the unnecessary tabs here. And let's give this div a class name of w-full, and within this div we are going to create a timeline which we will get it from the Aceternity UI. So let's head to Aceternity UI and I'm just going to search for the timelines here. All right, let's click on it. We're going to use this kind of timeline here in this project. This is amazing. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the codes. Let's create a new component and I'm going to call it timeline.jsx. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the codes here. Let's add the timeline component to experiences.jsx. I'm going to do that within this div. All right, here we go. In timeline.jsx, there seems to be an error. If I open up the dev tools, it is saying cannot read properties of undefined reading map. This error occurs because the component is trying to iterate over a data property that is currently undefined. All right, let's head back to experiences.jsx to address this issue. So right at the top, I'm going to import experiences from constants. I mistyped the experiences. All right, here we go. Now you can see it contains title, job, date, and contents. All right, within the timeline, I'm gonna add the data is equals to experiences. All right, now if I scroll down, you can see the result right here. Now let's head back to timeline.jsx to do some sort of modification. So down below, I'm going to collapse all the divs because things get overwhelming and confusing, and making it easier to focus on the relevant parts of the code. So for the main div, I'm going to rename it to c-space section-spacing. Now you can see the spacing between those two different sections. Let's open this up and I'm going to go ahead and remove this div and let's add h2 tag. And in here, I'm going to say my work experience. Let's give it a class name of text-heading. I found a mistype here. Let's fix that. Okay. All right. Now let's remove the mx-auto and max-7xl. All right, here we go. Let's open this up. Now you can see the iteration is going on here. Now we need to add our own data to this component. So let's open up this div and let's collapse the inner divs. So in here, we need to do some modification on the class name. Let's remove the dark prefix and bg-white, and let's convert the bg-black to bg-midnight. And let's remove all of those lefts, and let's add our own lefts, which is minus left-15 pixels. All right, here we go. Now for its inner div, let's remove the dark prefixes and the colors. All right, now we are done with this div. Now for the h3 tag, let's remove the h3 tag. And in here, I'm gonna add a div with the class name of flex-cool, make it hidden on mobile devices, gap-2, text-XL, font-bold, and for medium and large devices, make it flex or visible, and also make it padding-left 20 and make the text 4XL. And finally, I'm gonna say text-neutral-300. All right, now within this div, let's create a h3 tag, and within it, I'm gonna say item.date. All right, now if you make the browser bigger, you can see the dates. Let's create another h3 tag, and let's say item.title. And let's create another one, and this time we're gonna say item.job. All right, here we go. Now we can see the dates, the title, and the job. Now let's add those class name. So for item.title, I'm gonna give it a class name of text-3xl and text-neutral-400. Now I'm gonna go ahead and copy this and paste it for the third h3 tag. I'm gonna make the 400 to 500 to make it even darker. All right, here we go. All right, this div that we have defined was for the desktop view. And this div is for mobile view. Let's make the browser smaller so that we can see our workflow. All right, now within this div, I'm gonna remove the h3 tag and let's replace it with div. And within this div, I'm gonna add the h3 tag again for 2 times. For the first one, I'm gonna say item.job and item.date. Let's change the places. All right, here we go. Now let's give this div a class name of block md hidden margin button -4, and also say text-2xl font-bold text-left text-neutral-300. All right, we are done with this div. Now below this div, let's go ahead and add the item.contents.map, and it'll take each content and an index, and it'll return a paragraph with the content. And let's add this a class name of margin bottom -3 font-normal text-neutral-300. You know what, let's make it 400 to even make it darker. All right, and let's add the key property equals to index. All right, now let's make the browser bigger to see the result more clearly. As I scroll down, you will notice that the vertical line is not aligned correctly with the circles. To fix this, we will adjust the positioning so that the vertical line aligns perfectly with the circles. So in here, let's close this and open up the div that contain the circles and the vertical line. Now, in this class name, we will remove the dark prefix and the via neutral 200. So in here, I'm going to delete those, and let's define the positioning. I'm going to say for medium and large devices, make the left-1 and also left-1. All right, we can also change the color if we want. Instead of blue, I'm going to say via lavender over 50. All right, we have now completed the experiences section. I'm not going to lie, it was annoying, especially those areas that need to be modified. However, all the effort was worth it, as we now have a beautiful and fully responsive work experience section that looks great on all devices. Next, we will create a testimonial section to allow clients to learn more about our work and see feedbacks from previous projects. Similar to the experience section, we will use pre-built components, this time from Magic UI. to speed up development and ensure a polished design. Before we dive into that, let's open up the Explorer and navigate to the Sections folder. In there, we will create a new file called Testimonial.jsx. Once the file is set up, we will start by running refce. Now let's add this to app component. Below this, I'm gonna say testimonial. And let's remove one of the comments and also one of the sections. Let's head back to testimonial. Now right in here, we're gonna use a component, which we are going to get it from Magic UI. So let's head to the Magic UI website. Let's click on the icon and let's click on the marquee. All right, today we are going to use this marquee. So in the installation, I'm going to use the manual way. Let's copy this and let's open up the Explorer. In the components folder, I'm going to create a new file which is called marquee.jsx. And let's copy that again and paste it right here. All right. Now let's do some cleanups in here. So first I'm going to remove the interface and let's remove the imports and let's add import TW-merge from Tailwind-merge. And let's remove the marquee props in here. I'm going to convert this CN to TW-merge. And also the syntax is TypeScript syntax. So we're going to use ternary operator. So before that, I'm going to change the double quotation to single quotation. And let's say $. If the vertical is true, then use flex-col. Otherwise, use flex-row. All right, now let's remove this. All right, here we go. So in here, again, these are TypeScript syntax. So we got to use ternary operator again. First, I'm going to comment those out so that we can copy and paste the class names easily. After the comma, I'm going to go ahead and say, if the vertical is true, use this, otherwise use that one. So I mean, if the vertical is true, I'm going to use this one, otherwise I'm going to use that one. All right, now let's remove the comment. Now another one is for the pause on hover. So in here I'm going to say, if the pause on hover was true, then use this one. And let's do it for the reverse. If the reverse is true, let's use this class name. All right. There we go. All right, now we are done with the marquee.jsx. Now let's head back to testimonial.jsx. All right, the next step is the marquee animation. I have already added the marquee animation in index.cs, so we can easily pass this step. Next is the marquee UI itself. So right at the top, I'm gonna go to the code and click on the copy and paste those code in here. All right, let's clean this up. At the top, we don't need this review definition because we have already defined our own in index.js. Let's remove these unnecessary imports and instead import tw-merge from tw-merge. Next, we will import the marquee component. All right, now let's remove this and let's replace the CNs with tw-merge to handle our class merging more effectively. After that, we will rename marquee demo to testimonial and add export default to make the component available for use. All right, now if we check the DevTools in the browser, it is saying review is not defined. To fix this, we will import reviews from the constant file. All right, now you can see that it is loading the necessary data. So why is that not working? So let's open up the DevTool. It is saying that CN is not defined. All right, let's head back to marquee. All right, right here, I forgot to change the CN to tw-merge. All right, here we go. So now if I scroll down, you can see that the testimonial is now working. All right, let's head back to testimonial.jsx and let's do some modification on the class name. We're going to start removing the light style here, and then we need to remove the dark prefixes. And you know what? Let's remove the BG gray and the hover BG gray. And in here, we're going to add our own background colors. All right, here we go. So in here, I'm going to say BG-gradient to right, BG-indigo to store. All right, and let's add hover, make the BG-royal. All right, here we go. Now let's add some sort of hover animation here by saying hover-animation. Now, if you start hover over a card, you can see that smooth animation is going on. All right, here we go. Now, within the next div, which is the image, I'm going to add bg-white over 10. You can see that the background image is changed. Now let's remove the dark prefixes. All right. Now let's scroll down on the testimonial. We gotta add our heading. So let's wrap this div inside the div. All right. And let's add this div a class name of items-start margin top -25 md margin top -35 c space, and within it let's define a h2 tag with a class name of text heading, and let's say here from my clients. Now we need to add spacing between h2 and the subsequent div by adding margin top -12. For the final div, because we haven't defined the from-background into our index.css, so we gotta change it to from-primer. And let's do it for the another div. And there we go. We have now completed the testimonial section where clients can see feedbacks from previous projects and determine whether they are satisfied with our services. This section adds credibility and trust to our portfolio, showcasing the positive experiences of others. Great work. In this section, clients can share their thoughts, provide feedbacks, or even send an invitation to collaborate on their projects. This will serve as a direct communication channel, making it easy for potential clients to reach out to us. In order to achieve that, let's open up the Explorer, and in the Sections folder, I'm going to create a new file which is called contact.jsx. Now let's run refc here. Now let's remove the import React. Now let's add this component to app.jsx. So right below this testimonial, I'm going to add the contact here. All right, here we go. Now we don't need this section anymore, and as well as the contact comment. Now you can see the contact right here. So let's head back to contact.jsx. And let's remove this div, and let's add a section with a class name of relative flex items-center c-space section-spacing. All right. Now within it, let's create another div with a class name of flex-col items-center justify-center max-w-md and p-5 and max-auto border-white with the opacity of 10, and let's say rounded -2xl and bg-primary. Now within this div, I'm gonna go ahead and create another div again, and within it, it'll render the h2 tag and a paragraph. And for the h2 tag, I'm going to say let's talk, and let's add a class name of text-heading. All right, here we go. Now for the paragraph, I'm going to say whether you're looking to build a new website, improve your existing platform, or bring a unique project to life, I'm here to help. And let's give this paragraph a class name of font-normal text-neutral-400. Now let's define a class name for this div, which we're going to have flex-col items-start w-full gap-5 and margin bottom of 10. Now below this div, let's create a form element, and with the class name of w-full. And within this form, I'm going to go ahead and create another div with the class name of margin bottom -5. Now within it, I'm going to go ahead and create a label tag, and let's say full name. And in here, I'm going to add the HTML4 equals to name with the class name of field-label, which is a custom Tailwind CSS. And below this label, let's create a input tag with the ID of equals to name and let's add the name equals to name, and let's say type equals to text, and let's add a class name of field-input, and also field-input-focus. Now, whenever you click on it, it'll be focused. All right, here we go. Now let's add a placeholder, and in here I'm going to say John Doe. Now I'm going to say it is a required field, and let's add a autocomplete equals to name. Now I'm just going to go ahead and select all of this div and duplicate it for 2 times, 1 and 2. All right. Now for the second one, I'm going to change the name to email, and let's rename all of those name to email, and let's change the type to email as well. And for the placeholder, I'm going to say johndoe@gmail.com. And for the third div, I'm going to change the label to message, and let's select all of the names in here again and change it to message. And let's convert the input to text area. And for the placeholder, I'm going to say share your thoughts. There we go. Also, let's add some rows in here. I'm going to say rows equals to 4. Now we got to add a button for this form. So below this div, I'm going to say button, and let's say send with the class name of w-full, padding x-1, and padding y-3, text-lg, text-center, and rounded-md, cursor-pointer, bg-radial, and let's also say from -lavender to -royal, and finally hover -animation. Now you can see the button is animated. Inside this form, we need a way to save the values that the user inputs. To achieve this, I'll create a use state at the top of the component. So right exactly in here, I'm going to create a use state, and let's rename the first to form data. And also let's remove this second value and replace it with object that contains name, email, message. All right, here we go. Now let's define these properties that we have defined right here to our field. So now within this full name input tag, I'm going to add a attribute which is called value equals to form data.name. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it for the rest of the inputs. All right. Now in here, I'm going to say email, and for the last part, I'm going to say message. Now when we try to insert values, it doesn't work yet because we need to define an event handler to notify the input field that a new value is being entered. To do this, I'll create a handle change method. Which is a function that'll take an event. Now for the body, I'm going to set the form data, and let's say ... form data, which is a spread operator, and after the comma, we need to come up with whichever property we would want to update. Now, of course, that is going to depend on which input we are typing in. And this is the case where we can do this dynamically by saying e.target.name, which could be the full name, the email, or the message input that the user is currently inserting. Now we will dynamically update this property equal to whatever value we have by saying e.target.value. Now let's copy this handle change, and in here let's define an event which is called onChange equals to handle change. I'm just going to copy this and paste it for the rest of the inputs. Now we can see that whenever the user is trying to input whatever the values in here, which will going to invoke that handle change method. And that handle change method going to invoke the set form data, which is going to update the form data value based on the target name. Now we gotta work on this functionality. So let's scroll down, and for the button, I'm going to create a type which is equals to submit. And let's add a event handler for the button. So in here, I'm going to say const handle submit equals to a function which will going to take an event. All right, so right now, whenever the user submit the form, the browser automatically refreshes the page. To stop that from happening, we need to call e.prevent_default. Next, let's connect our handle submit function to the form by adding an onSubmit event handler. Inside it, we will pass handle submit so it runs when the form is submitted. To test if it is working, I'll add a console.log inside the function and print out the form data. Now let's open up the DevTools and fill in some dummy values. See, the data gets captured in the form object. Perfect. But to make this actually functional, we need to integrate email.js. So the user message gets sent directly to our email. All right, let's head over to the email.js website. Creating an account is super simple. Just enter your name, email address, and password. Since I already have an account, I'll just sign in. Once you're logged in, you will land on the dashboard. By default, the free plan gives you 200 monthly email requests, which is plenty. To get started, let's click Add New Service and select Gmail. You will see a service ID generated. Make sure to save this because we will need it later. I'll copy mine and paste it as a comment in my code for reference. Next, click Connect Account to grant email.js access to your Gmail. Once that's done, hit Create Service, and we are ready to go. All right, now let's head over to the email template section. Click Create New Template to set one up. First, we will tweak the default variables to match our needs. Instead of the generic name, I'll change it to my name. For example, Ali or John. For the reply to field, I'll replace it with reply to. Now for the subject line, let's make it dynamic. New message from name. Next, the email content. Start with the greeting, hello to-name. Add a clear title. You've got a new message from name. Then the body of the message, we will keep it simple but professional with best wishes, my perfect portfolio. Once you're happy with the template, hit apply changes. Now go to the setting tabs and copy your template ID. I'll paste mine into my code for later use. Don't forget to save the template again after any changes. And there you go. Your template is ready. Now let's head back to our code. In here, in order to use the email.js services, we got to install the email.js itself. So let's head to the terminal, and in here, I'm going to say npm install @email.js/browser. And once it is installed, right at the top, I'm going to say import email.js from @email.js/browser. Now I'm just going to go ahead and copy the email.js and paste it here. Email.js has a property which is called send, which will going to take a service ID. So, which is this one. I'm just going to copy this and paste it right here. And the next one is template ID. So I'm just going to do that again. And for the third one, which we're going to take a template parameter. So for that, I'm going to create an object, and it'll take from-name, and it'll use form_data.name. The reason why I used from-name is because form-name is a meta variable that we have defined in here. All right. So for the next one, I'm going to say to-name, which is Ali, and from-email. I'm going to say form_data.email, and for the to-email, I'm going to add my email address, for example. Obviously, you got to add yours. And for the next one, which is message, I'm going to say form_data.message. Before trying this out, let's add a loading effect in order to see whether our form is currently in the sending state or not. So right in here, I'm going to use USSS snippets to create a use state for us. And after that, I'm going to rename the first into is loading, and the second one, I'm going to say false for the initial value. All right, now let's define a dynamic text for our button. So within the button, I'm going to say if is loading is false, use send. Otherwise, show this sending so that we know it is sending something. Now, let's define set is loading to handle submit method. So right in here, I'm going to say set is loading to true. And I'm going to remove the console log in here. And let's add a try catch statement. And I'm going to wrap this email.js into the try catch. Now for the better logging, I'm going to add a console.log, and let's say form submitted. and let's say from data. Okay. Now let's make this function asynchronous. So in here, I'm going to add the async. In here, I'm going to say await email.js.send. All right. Now, once it is done processing this, I'm going to say set is loading to false. And let's add the notification. For example, I'm going to say alert success. And for the catch statement, I'm going to say set is loading to false. In here, I'm going to say console.log the error. And let's add the alert. In here, I'm going to say fail. All right, now once you are done creating this, let's try this out, whether it is working or not. Let's say alex@gmail.com. Hey, can you do me a favor, please? Let's send it. And it is saying failed. So why is that happening right now? Let's check it out. Oh, it is saying that the public is required. All right, let's add that fourth parameter, which we actually forgot to add that. So let's head to the email.js and let's click on this icon, and you can see the API key right here. I'm going to copy this and paste it right here. All right, try this out again. Let's send that again. Now it is sending success. This is the email inventory. Now you can see that right at the bottom, you can see the email address and the details of the text. Now we are completed this section. The next thing that we need to do is to make this even better. Once it is sent, I want this values to be reset. So below this alert, I'm gonna say set from data, and it'll take name, which is an empty, emails empty, and also make the message empty as well. So let's try this out. Once the email is sent, the form value is going to be reset. That's perfect. Now, obviously, we are not going to use this default alert. So let's create our own alert by opening up the Explorer. And in the components folder, I'm going to create a new file, which is called alert.jsx. Now in here, I'm going to run refce. Let's remove the import one. And we're going to add this alert into contact.jsx. So I'm going to add it right here. There we go. You can see the alert in here. So let's head back to alert.jsx. Now alert will going to take two parameters, which are type and text. And let's define this div a class name of fixed z-50 flex items-center justify-center bottom-5 and finally right-5. Now you can see bottom right corner. All right, now within this div, let's create another div which will going to have two paragraphs. All right, now for the first paragraph, we're going to say if type is triple equals to danger, show fail. Otherwise, show the success. And let's add this paragraph a class name of, let's make a dynamic string as well. And let's say flex rounded-full. And let's define a $sign. And let's say if type is triple equal to danger, make the background red-500. Otherwise, make the background lavender. Now for the second paragraph, we're going to add the text parameter here, and let's define a class name of margin right-2 text-left. Now let's give this div a class name. This would be a dynamic string as well. And here I'm going to say padding-2 $sign. If the type is triple equal to danger again, make the background red-500. Otherwise, I'm going to say bg-royale. And let's add items-center text-indigo-100 leading-none. For larger devices, make it rounded-full. And let's say flex and LG inline-flex rounded-MD, and finally padding-5. And we can also add some sort of animation here to make it even beautiful. So right at the top, I'm going to import motion, and in here we're going to use animate presence as well. Animate presence from motion React. Right, now I'm going to wrap this div with motion.div. Now let's define a variant for our motion. So in here I'm going to say const alert variance is equals to an object. Let's define a hidden part, which means before the animation is going on. So in here, I'm going to say with the opacity of 0 and translate y of 50 and scale of 0.8. And when the animation is happening, make it visible. So let's define the opacity of 1 and make the translate y 0 with the scale of 1. And let's define the exit animation with the opacity of 0, y minus 50, and scale of 0.8 again. And I'm just going to copy this. And after this class name, I'm going to say initial value would be equals to hidden, and animate is equals to visible. For the exit animation, I'm going to say exit and variance equals to alert variance. And let's add the transition, duration of 0.3 seconds, with ease in out. Now let's wrap this div with animate presence. All right, now let's head back to contact.jsx. Now we got to define a state for our alert. So in here, I'm going to say const show alert set show alert equals to useState. And for the initial value, I'm going to say false. Now we got to use this show alert. So let's scroll down. And in here, I'm going to say if the show alert was true, then show the alert. And let's define the type equals to alert type, and which we will be going to define it as a dynamic text. So we need to define it as a state. And let's define a text equals to alert message. And this is actually applied for the text as well. All right, now let's define two state for those two. So first I'm going to say const alert type and set alert type is equals to useState. And for the initial value, I'm going to say success. And let's create another one by saying const alert message set alert message equals to useState. For the initial value, I'm going to say empty. And now we're going to replace this alert because we don't need this anymore. And in here, I'm going to say set alert type to success and set alert message to your message has been sent. Now we got to define set show alert to true in order to reveal it on bottom right corner. Now I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and we got to paste it for the cache block. To be honest with you guys, I don't really like this because we are actually duplicating ourselves. So why not make this as a higher module so that we can use it everywhere? So right at the top, before the handle submit button, I'm going to create a method which is called show alert message equals to, and it'll have type and message. And in the block, I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this and paste it right here. Instead of saying success, I'm gonna say type, and for the message as well, I'm gonna paste the message right here. All right, now let's scroll down, paste that below the set from data. And for the parameter, I'm gonna say success with that message. And I'm just gonna copy this and paste it here for the catch block with the danger, and let's say something went wrong. And if I fill out the form and click on the send button, you get notified that the message has been sent successfully. All right, there's a minor issue with the styling of the success for the alert. We're gonna fix that later. So inside the show alert message, I'm gonna go ahead and create a set timeout and make the set show alert false. And I'm gonna say make it happen after 5 seconds. All right, now let's fill out the form. You know what? Let's try the error process. So right in here, I'm just gonna remove a single letter of the template ID so that it'll generate the error process. All right, now everything is working perfectly, except we need to modify the style of the alert. All right, let's head back to alert.jsx. Now on the first div, I'm gonna make the background red 800. And for this paragraph, I'm gonna say uppercase, padding x-2, padding y-1, text-xs, and font dash semi-bold, and margin right -3. All right, let's try that again. Now everything is working perfectly. All right, the final touch that we need to do is to add a stunning background. All right, for that, let's head to the Magic UI website. And in here, I'm going to search for the particles. Now we're going to use this beautiful background. In here, click on the manual tab, and I'm just going to copy the entire code. And let's open up the Explorer, and let's create a new file, which is called particles.jsx. Now let's paste those codes right here. Now we're going to remove the TypeScript syntaxes. So before that, I'm going to replace the import cn with import TWMerge from tailwind-merge. And I'm going to remove this property. All right, now let's remove the interfaces. Let's remove the mouse position, mouse event, and we're going to remove the interfaces again, and the string and the number as well, and also the type circle and rect.fc1, whatever that comes after the useref. You know, I mean the green stuff. All right, now let's remove this numbers again and again, and number, null, and finally the Node.js. Here we go. Now let's scroll down. Let's remove the circles and the circle as well. And in here, I'm gonna select all of the numbers and replace it with emptiness. And the last one, the circle. And finally, we're gonna replace the embedded cn in the class names with the TWMerge. All right, now you can see it is working properly. All right, now let's head back to contact.jsx, and within the section, I'm gonna add the particles component. All right, now the screen is black, indicating something went wrong. So it is saying that the type error. So let's head to the source tab. It is saying that in the line 6 for the use state. So let's head back to particles.jsx. Now in the line 7 or 6, we gotta remove the mouse position. All right, here we go. Let's add. All right, here we go. If I scroll down, you can see the particles right here. So let's head back to contact.jsx, and I'm gonna head to the Aceternity UI, click on the code, and copy all of the styling for the particles and paste it right here. Now let's check it out. Now let's refresh it. Oh, let's make the color to white. All right, now let's modify the z index. So in here, I'm gonna say minus z-50. All right, now it is behind the 4. Now let's make it bigger. Now you can see that everything is working properly. All right, now we have actually completed the forms, and the next section that we need to create is the footer section, which is straightforward and pretty simple. All right, the final step that we gotta implement is the footer section. So for that, I'm gonna open up the Explorer, and in the sections folder, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new file, which is called footer.jsx. And in here, I'm gonna run refce, and let's remove the import, React, and let's add this component to our app.jsx. So I'm gonna head to the app.jsx, and in here, let's remove this comment. Here I'm gonna say footer with a self-closing tag. There we go. Now let's head back to footer. Now I'm just gonna replace this div with a section. All right, now let's define a class name of flex-wrap items-center, and let's say justify between gap-5 padding bottom of 3 text-sm text-neutral-400, and finally c-space. There we go. Now in here, I'm gonna define a self-closing div, and let's define a class name of bg-gradient to right from -transparent via -neutral-700 to transparent margin bottom -4 and height of 1 pixel -4. Right, here we go. Now you can see this beautiful line, and below this div, let's create another div, and this div will going to have 3 p tags. So let's define them. So this is the first one, second one, and the third one. And within this paragraph, I'm going to say terms and conditions. And for the second paragraph, I'm going to define this vertical line. And for the third one, I'm going to say privacy policy. All right, now let's define a class name of flex gap-2. Right now you can see it right here. Now below this div, I'm going to go ahead and create another div, and let's define a class name of flex gap-3. And within this div, we will load our social media's link. So for that, we got to import my socials from the constant. So right at the top, before the const footer, I'm going to import the my socials. Here we go. Now I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. And within this div, I'm going to iterate through the my socials. So in here, I'm going to say my socials.map. And let's say social and take the index. All right. And it'll return a anchor tag. And this anchor tag will render an image for us. All right. Now let's define, or let's scroll down to the bottom. And for the anchor tag, I'm going to say href of social.href and the key of index. And for the image, I'm going to say src of socials.icon. And let's add a class name of w-5 and h-5. And let's define an alternative of social.name. And now below this div, I'm going to go ahead and create a paragraph. So let's say copyright icon 2025 Ali, all rights reserved. There we go. Now this is the icons. All right, now we are completed this beautiful, functional, and yet responsive portfolio. Congratulations, guys. You did a great job.